Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. When the Magi had departed, an angel from the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. And he said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod will soon search for the child in order to kill him." Joseph got up and during the night took the child and his mother to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod died. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken to the prophet. "I have called my son out of Egypt." When Herod knew the Magi had fooled him, he grew very angry. He sent soldiers to kill all the children in Bethlehem and in all the surrounding territory who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. This fulfilled the word spoken through Jeremiah the prophet. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and much grieving, Rachel weeping for her children, and she did not want to be comforted because they were no more. After King Herod died, an angel from the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. "Get up," the angel said, "and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. Those who are trying to kill the child are dead." Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus ruled over Judea in place of his father Herod, Joseph was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he went to the area of Galilee. He settled in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Joseph was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he went to the area of Galilee. The holly and the laurel are still fresh. The outdoorsy clean smell of the spruce-scented candle lingers in the air. Some presents in open boxes remain under the Christmas tree. They are eye candy to us, a pirate's bounty. Most of them are shorn of wrapping paper, and yet some remain wrapped. They are for relatives or friends whom you haven't seen yet. I mean, goodness gracious, Christmas was only a few days ago. Coast 103.5 is still playing 24 hours of Christmas music. Christmas is still in the air, and we like it that way. Peace on earth, goodwill to all. Why can't it be Christmas every day of the year? Remember asking that when you were a child? Why can't Christmas be every day? The answer is, if we're God's way, Christmas would be every day. I think that's kind of the point. And we like it that way. It was springtime. You know when the weather starts to get nice and you open up the windows, letting fresh air into stuffy, claustrophobic rooms that have been breathing manufactured heat for 3 months and are cluttered with blankets and heavy clothes. So it was springtime when, as a young child, I heard the singing of Christmas carols coming from upstairs at my house. I thought it was the radio at first. I mean, how odd, how out of place, how absolutely crazy. As I went up to investigate, I discovered it was my aunt who was doing spring cleaning and singing Christmas carols. I asked her if she suddenly had gone off the deep end, and we needed to call the guys in the white coats to come and take her away, ha-ha, hee-hee, to the happy home, with trees and flowers and chirping birds and basket weavers who sit and smile and twiddle their thumbs and toes, and where life is beautiful all the time, ha-ha, hee-hee. That's an old song called "They're Coming to Take Me Away, ha-ha, hee-hee." She laughed, and then my aunt, Eva, the Sunday school teacher, said, "Shouldn't every day be Christmas?" Touché. Yes, Christmas should be every day, or at least extend a little beyond last Wednesday. For Christmas' sake, give me a break. Goodbye, Christmas, a Happy New Year. We all want a little break, a little bit of a break to relax. Go see Cats or 1917 at the movies, or just spend time with one another and be everything that the birth of Jesus is all about. But the real world comes crashing in. Even the church won't let us rest on our laurels and holly.
We all want a little break.
For example, take a look at today's gospel lesson. Do you know what yesterday was on the Christian
Spend time
calendar?
with one another and be
It was the
everything
official
that
day of the massacre of the Holy Innocents, otherwise known as Childermas.
comes crashing in.
I know about this because for 9 years prior to coming to St. Andrew and St. Charles, I served the Church of the Holy
For
Innocents
example, take
in
a look at
Atlanta.
today's gospel lesson.
Basically,
Do you know what yesterday was?
today's gospel lesson is about Herod, who, after learning from the Magi, the three wise men, that is, about the birth of a new God-chosen king of all creation, that being Jesus, he sent soldiers to Bethlehem to kill all male children under the age of 2. This incident is called the Massacre of the Holy Innocents. Now, massacre is kind of a strong word, since Bethlehem at the time probably had about 1,500 inhabitants, and taking into consideration adults, men, women, teenagers, other children, scholars estimate probably 20 children were killed, and not the 10,000 to 50,000 numbers that have been spread around for ages.
Massacre is kind of a strong word.
Still, it was a heinous crime.
Probably had about 15.
And because it was such a monstrously wicked act,
Adults, men, women,
what is it doing then in our gospel lesson just a few days
children were
after
killed.
Christmas?
And not the 10,000
I loved hearing my aunt singing Christmas carols in May,
that have been spread around.
but I don't like hearing about the murder of children just a few days after Christmas. Why do we do this?
Because it was such a monstrously
The answer cuts to the core of our faith and life.
what is
The answer points to the fact that Christianity is about real life.
days.
Christianity is not an escape.
I
If
love
you want to
hearing
escape,
my
then
aunt
go to
singing carols
Disneyland.
in May.
Nobody gets killed in Disneyland. There's no trash in the streets of Disneyland. There are no frowns. It's all smiles, cotton candy, Mickey, Minnie, and Goofy, Disney's secular version of the Trinity, that is. I'm sure Disneyland is packed today with people who want Christmas to continue. And yet we in the church get Herod.
No trash in the streets of Disney.
Who wants despicable Herod murdering innocent children so close to Christmas? What's wrong with the church?
Disney's secular
Well, let me
version of
tell
the
you.
Trinity, that is.
We were invited to spend Christmas dinner with close friends who live way up in Santa Clarita. Now, the next time I go there, I'm thinking of booking a flight on Southwest.
And yet we in the church get Herod.
Seriously, Copper Hill Drive is wider than the 405. It has an HOV lane specifically for carpooling Lexus and suburban SUVs.
Let me tell you.
Despite that, it was a delightful afternoon and evening. 3 generations gathered. The food was fabulous. The wine was top shelf. The lake is, not so much.
Seriously, Copper Hill Drive.
As we sat around the dinner table after the meal, enjoying dessert and one another's company, the conversation centered upon the shooting of the students at nearby Saugus High School. You see, the eldest of the grandchildren present is a freshman at Saugus High. I hadn't seen her since the incident, and I wanted to hear her take on the shooting and her feelings about it. She shared how she was a little bit late for school that day because just before her mom was to drive her to school, she had run upstairs to change her jeans. That decision could have saved her life.
I hadn't seen her since the incident.
She arrived at school late after the shooting, but prior to the police arriving, a neighbor from across the street from the school stopped her from entering the school, telling her that there had been a shooting in the very area where she generally would hang out before classes started. She knew the victims and knew of the shooter. As she talked, we adults all listened attentively. Teach your parents well, sing Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young in their song, Teach Your Children. As wise as those of us with gray hair are, we need also to listen to the young. We may have wisdom, but they have freshness and new perspectives, unvarnished by the vagaries and perplexities of time.
Teach your parents well.
As we listened, issues like adolescent psychological struggles, evil, and if the shooter is in hell or has been forgiven by God and is in heaven, rose to the surface like an inflatable life vest in water. It was a wonderful and meaningful conversation. There was no anger,
As we listened,
no condescending, oh yeah, well,
like adolescent
what about
psychological
this
struggles,
comments.
evil,
It was simply
if the
people who
shooters
love
in
one
hell
another on
has been
Christmas
forgiven
Day,
by God and is in heaven,
sitting around a
rose
meal,
from
the real
surface
Eucharist of the
like
day,
an inflatable life.
discussing how the birth of Christ affects our everyday lives.
It was a wonderful and meaningful
Jesus'
conversation.
birth means
There
nothing
was no anger,
if it can't be implemented in our daily
condescending,
lives.
"Oh, yeah, well,
Life
what about
is
this?"
not the Truman Show. You can't go to Disneyland every day. That
sitting around a meal
is
the
just not real.
Eucharist of the day, discussing
Once
how
in doing a
the birth of
Christmas
Christ
program with a group of high schoolers,
Jesus' birth.
we were sharing our Christmas Day experiences. We were laughing and joking about all the stuff. And one guy shared how Christmas to him is a bit sad in that a few years back his grandmother had died on Christmas Day. And at this point, a girl, a high school senior, so 17, 18 years old,
Once in doing a
she
Christmas
looked at
program
him
with a group
in
of high schoolers,
disbelief.
we were
And in
sharing our
all
Christmas
seriousness,
Day
looking at me, she said,
laughing and
"Well,
joking
wait a
about all
minute.
the stuff. And
Do
one
people
guy
really
shared how
die
Christmas to him is a
on
bit
Christmas
sad
Day?"
in that a few years back his grandmother
And then she
died.
started to cry.
And at this point,
You know, some of the group
high school
snickered
senior,
at her. How
17,
dumb can you
18
be?
years old, she
But her reaction and comment were not funny. Actually,
and in
they were
all
quite
seriousness, looking at
profound.
me, she said, "Well,
Yes, Virginia, people die on Christmas Day.
on Christmas Day."
This girl's tears were the amniotic fluid gushing forth from Mary's womb as Jesus exited the safety of his mother's womb, like all of us, to be born into a world that at best is unfair and at worst downright nasty.
Yes,
At that moment,
people died.
in that youth group meeting, this
girl's
high school
tears were the
senior was
amniotic fluid
born.
gushing forth from Mary's
Born
womb.
into the
As
real
Jesus
world
exited
and
the
not
safety of his
Disneyland where
mother's
she'd been living.
womb.
She was not to be
All of us
ridiculed,
to be
but
born into a world
congratulated
that at best
for
is
giving birth to a
unfair
deeper level of
and at
existence
worst
which
downright
many
nasty.
adults ignore or refuse to enter.
At that moment,
Her question was, how can God allow death, destruction, and evil in creation? How can one believe in a God who allows people to die
Disneyland
on, of all days, Christmas Day?
was not to be ridiculed, but
Profound
for giving
questions.
birth to a deeper level of existence.
Those who laugh at her do so in order to hide their own anxiety and their own
The
ignorance.
question was, how can God allow death?
Why do we talk about such things as murder and death so soon after
How can one believe in a
Christmas?
God who allows people to die?
It's because that's God's purpose in Christ.
Profound.
I'd like to quote from William Penn Warren's All the King's Men, surely a contender for the elusive title of the great American novel.
And their own ignorance.
Warren writes, "The creation of man,
Talk about such things as
whom
murder
God
and death
in his
so soon
foreknowledge knew doomed to sin,
is because
was
that's
the
God's
awful
purpose.
index of God's omnipotence. For it
I'd
would
like
have
to
been a
quote from
thing
William
of
Penn Warren's
trifling
All the
and
King's Men,
contemptible
surely a
ease
contender for the elusive
for
title of
perfection to
great
create mere perfection.
Warren writes,
To do so would,
"The creation
to
of
speak
man,
truth, be not
in his
creation,
foreknowledge knew doomed
but
to
extension.
sin, was the
Separateness
awful
is
index of
identity,
God's omnipotence."
and the only way for God to create,
Would have been a
truly
thing of
create,
trifling
man was to make him separate from God himself.
for perfection
And to
to
be
create
separate from
mere
God
perfection.
is to be sinful.
To do so
The
would
creation of evil is therefore the index of God's glory
but
and God's
extension.
power,
Separateness
That had to
is
be.
identity,
so that the creation of good might be the index of man's glory and
man
power.
who was to make
But
him
by
separate
God's
from
help,
God himself.
by
To be
God's help
separate from God
and
is
God's
to be
wisdom.
sinful. The creation of evil
It would be
is therefore
triflingly and contemptibly
God's
easy for
glory,
God, perfection,
God's power.
to create mere perfection,
That had to be,
says Warren.
so that the creation of
That
good
wouldn't be
might the
creation.
index of man's
he's
glory
right.
and power.
Rather, it would be
by God's
extension,
help.
an extension of God,
By
God's
God's
self.
help and
That
God's
would be easy for God to do. It's only in creating separateness from God's self could God truly create. And by definition, separateness from God is sinful. And here is Warren's best line of all.
He's right.
The creation of evil is therefore the index, that is, the measure
That would be
of God's glory and power, in order that the creation of good would be the index, the measure of humanity's glory
And by
and power.
definition, separateness from God
In other
is sinful.
words, by creating separate human beings from God's self, who then are capable of evil and yet choose to do good, thereby creating good, is not only God's greatest achievement, but it is ours as well. Creating good out of what could be evil is humanity's greatest glory.
In other words, by creating
Christ's
separate
birth
human
brings
beings from
meaning
God's self,
to life.
who then are capable of evil,
People
yet
without
choose
God in
to
their
do
lives
good,
seek meaning in
thereby
false
creating good,
gods of their own creation, which by definition is not from
because
God.
it is ours as
Non-believers blame guns for the shooting at
creating
Saugus,
good out of what could be
or lack of homes for the homeless as the cause of their plight, or plastic straw for floods, tornadoes in the Midwest. But these are false gods. They make us feel good, but they can't relieve the angst or give meaning to the existence where Herod's heinous crime continues on our high school campuses. The only answer to that is humanity's selfishness. And the ultimate answer to selfish sinfulness is Christmas. That is Christ's birth into a world where terrible things happen. We can take away guns, cars, straws, big gulps, dodgeball, and cops and robbers. But these don't get to the root of the problem, which is our human condition. We are not perfect. We are self-centered. The core meaning of the birth of Jesus is to say that God has entered the world, showing us the way humans can live with one another in peace. God enters through Christ to give life meaning. It's a commitment to this God and other manifestations of God that solves life's issues that gods of our own creation simply cannot. And it's only through God's help and God's wisdom that we're able to choose and act out of love and goodness. And those people who don't believe in God don't believe in nothing. They will believe in anything. Herod killed 20 children with swords 2,000 years ago. 2 children were killed at Saugus. 17 children were killed at Parkland. So much has happened in 2,000 years, and yet so little change. So the answer is yes. We need to hear about Herod's killing spree this morning. We need to hear of life's pains, sufferings, and tragedies. We need to hear about them so we can face them and overcome them. That is what Christmas is for. And that is the reason we need every day to be Christmas Day. Thus, perhaps some Sunday in May or June, perhaps our hymns will be Christmas hymns, just to remind us that every day needs to be Christmas Day.
Is what Christmas is for.
Amen.
And that is the reason we need every day to be